And here we are.
Welcome to Galactic Terrors. I'm Jim Chambers.
I'm Carol Geisander.
And we are pleased to introduce you to the first session in a new online reading series sponsored by the Horror Writers Association of New York chapter, actually, I should say. Tonight we have a great lineup of readers with us. We have Teel James Glenn, Amy Grech, Marc Abbott, and Lisa Morton, all ready to bring you some fantastic stories, some dark stories, some weird stories, some cosmic terrors.
It's a very cool thing. You know, we're calling this Galactic Terrors, and we've been doing readings of our members of the Horror Writers Association of New York in New York City in person. And of course, we all know we're not doing that. But we did one of these live online for Heliosphere, which is one of our local science fiction conventions. And we did that back in April. And then we started thinking about it, saying, well, this is fun. Let's keep doing this some more. So we've taken the Galactic Terrors as sort of a interesting cosmic twist on it. Some of our stories are many different kinds of horror. Some of them are science fiction oriented and all sorts of things. But most of our folks are from Horror Writers Association. Jim, you want to tell us a little more about it?
Sure. The Horror Writers Association is an international support group for support and networking group for authors of dark fiction and horror. And we provide a number of programs and resources for people writing horror fiction. We have a mentoring program. We provide a monthly newsletter full of market news and information. We also administer the Bram Stoker Awards every year for superior achievement in various types of horror fiction. We run StokerCon, the annual convention of the Horror Writers Association, which will be taking place next year in 2021 in Denver. And we have chapters all across the U.S., as well as in other countries. And I think, in fact, I don't know if this is formally announced yet, but I think we have a chapter brewing now, even in India, which is pretty spectacular. So we're really, really extending our reach. The New York chapter is based here in and around New York City. And it's full of some great authors who are going to be bringing their fiction to you tonight. And we're also going to be showcasing, as part of the Galactic Terror series, other members of the HWA from outside New York. Tonight we have Lisa Morton joining us from California. Lisa, of course, is a past president of the HWA, and so she's very familiar with the organization and what it does. If you want to find out more about the Horror Writers Association, you can go to horror.org. And if you'd like to find out more about the local chapter, HWA-NY, you can visit our website for that information too, hwany.org. So this is, as Carol was saying, we've done a bit of this with Heliosphere, and we decided to take a different sort of philosophy for this reading series. It's a horror reading series, but it's not strictly horror. We're really hoping to present genre blends, dark fiction from other genres, science fiction, fantasy, crime, and of course we're going to include straight up horror stories as well. So Carol, what do you think about that mix?
Well, I think as long as we have something with tentacles in at least every other show, I'm going to be really happy. I think that'll work out fine.
Tentacles are good.
Yeah, tentacles are us.
Yeah, so this is our first broadcast, and we hope that you guys will bear with us. We may have to iron out a few wrinkles as we go. We've been working busily behind the scenes to pull this together. I have to thank Carol for all of the work she's put into getting this up and running, for producing some video clips that you'll see throughout the program, for organizing this, reaching out to people for making really incredibly useful spreadsheets.
Color-coded.
Color-coded, yeah. And special thanks to Lou Rera. Lou, I hope you're on with us tonight. Lou helped us out with a little bit with some graphics work to make things that much nicer tonight. And the whole HWA NY group has really been supportive of this. And several of our members have jumped in at a moment's notice to help us test out this new platform that we're using. And we hope to present this going forward on a regular basis. Every second Thursday of the month is our schedule. So tonight is a little bit off that schedule. We consider this kind of the pilot episode. You know, we were talking about how TV shows used to launch on a different night than their regular day and time. So that's our version of this. And I want to especially thank our readers tonight for being part of this inaugural program, for signing on without hesitation when we asked them about coming on for the session. We're thrilled to have everybody here tonight. I think it's going to be a stellar program. And, we're looking forward to hearing what our audience thinks as well. Just a few nuts and bolts pieces. You should see a comment field to the right of your screen. I see some of you are already posting there, so that's awesome. We'd love to hear what you think as the program continues. After each author's reading, we will take questions. We're going to do a little Q&A, a little live Q&A. So you'll just need to post your questions in the comment box, and we will pick those up and answer them, or ask the authors to answer them, I should say. One thing that we will save for the end is we're going to, after all the readings, bring everybody on and just kind of talk about what everyone has coming up next, what their next project is, what their next event or appearance will be. So if you have questions like that, let's save those for the end of the session.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sounds great.
Awesome. All right. So I see we're gathering some eyes, which is terrific. Thank you to everybody who's joining us tonight. We're excited to see you here. I think everybody is adjusting to this kind of, we were talking about that before, everyone's adjusting to this kind of communication platform now, especially with the pandemic. And there's been a real change in how we're using this technology to communicate. And it's pretty remarkable that we can do this, I think. I think it's awesome. I mean, we really spent a lot of time as a chapter on our in-person readings over the years. We had a series at the Morbid Anatomy Museum that was very successful until the museum closed. We had a series at the Lovecraft Bar, which also closed.
I didn't want to call attention to that because people may not invite us to do readings there again, but yeah.
Are you sensing a theme? Right. Because we also did readings at the Kill Bar, which closed. So our last scheduled reading was supposed to be at Otto's Shrunken Head back in May, and that was at the thick of the pandemic, and so of course everything was closed then. I don't think we can take the blame for that one.
No, that wasn't us. That wasn't us.
But I think that's probably enough of our chatting. We should probably jump in and ask our readers to get going. I will let you, Carol, start off by introducing our first reader tonight.
Excellent. I'd be happy to. Teel James Glenn has killed hundreds and been killed more times on stage and screen as he's traveled the world for 40 plus years. He's a stuntman, a fight choreographer, swordmaster, jouster, illustrator, storyteller, bodyguard, actor, and haunted house barker. His stories have been printed in over 100 magazines. I just have to stop and think about that. 100, okay. From Weird Tales, Mystery Weekly, Pulp Adventures, Spine Tingler, Sci-Fan, Mad, Black Belt, Fantasy Tales, Pulp Empire, Sherlock Holmes Mystery, Sci-Fan, Crimson Street, Afterburn SF, and Blazing Adventures. He's also the winner of the 2012 Pulp Arc Award for Best Author. His website is theurbanswashbuckler.com.
Welcome to again.
In the mist. The mist was a solid mass of night gray vagueness that imprisoned Ian McEwan like a straitjacket. He raced headlong through the featureless night, only faintly aware that somewhere above a moon shone, even if he could not see it, and that too, somewhere behind him, the beasties were hunting him. He found himself praying to Rhiannon like he had as a child when he'd hiked those same hills, only now he prayed for deliverance for his whole world as well. Ian crossed over an old stone bridge he did not recall from any of those long walks, and a cold sensation that he was lost settled on him like a fog. And the realization that maybe because of that all was lost. He slammed headlong into a sod wall and appeared out of a mist, though he, who had grown up in these highland hills, remembered no buildings up in the pass at all. It only served to convince him he was hopelessly lost. I cannot have traveled to the next valley yet, he thought, and they would not build an old-style hut as a watchtower. He felt along the wall until a gap of a doorway presented itself. "Open up," he pleaded, pounding on the thick timbers of the door, his voice shrill. "For the love of God, open up, they're after me." After a long moment, the door swung inward, and a sturdy Highland lass dressed in nightclothes, complete with sleep cap and swathed in a wool wrap, stood squinting at him, candle in her hand. "Who's after you, fella?" she said. She tucked a stray lock of red hair beneath her cap and inclined her head as if to try and place his face. "Those damn aliens," Ian said as he moved past her to all but collapse on a crude wooden bench by the fireplace. She closed the door behind him and turned. "Aliens? Those bulb-headed, blue-skinned sons of hell that destroyed the moon base on their way to us." He cradled his head in his hands. "Moon base," she repeated in a puzzled voice. He looked at her with an exasperated expression that for a moment replaced his fear. "Yes, the moon base." He looked around, then added, "Don't you have a holly screen or get the OmniNet?" "We're a bit isolated here," she said with a ghost of a smile. "You say these aliens are after you?" "After my breathing, every living, breathing Scotsman once they make their beachhead in Edinburgh." "They've landed in Edinburgh? And London and Cardiff?" He rose to move to her window, peering through the thick leaded glass to look back along the path that the weak light of the moon painted a ghostly watercolor blue. "Those damn bulbheads control all the island. I escaped confinement squads and took a military hover car, but they sound beamed my power cell, so I had to ditch it. Their optical scanners couldn't handle a good old Highland mist, so I got away on a foot, but when I realized where I was, I took off cross country for the pass. Then I got lost and ended up here." He slowed down in his story long enough to take a first real look around the tiny cottage. It was rustic in the extreme, with a few wooden furnishings, a stone fireplace, and iron utensils. Nowhere did he see an info port or a power strip, so he had to hope of calling out, "Gone." He had to find a way to get to the kingdom forces and try and put up a resistance. "We must go to the village center," the woman said in a surprisingly calm voice. "The others must know of this." She threw a wool coat over her nightclothes and draped a thick shawl over her shoulders. She opened the door and took him by the arm before he could speak, her very calm demeanor silencing any protest from him. Once outside, the night air seemed even colder. The shadows were liquid with life as she led him down the path. There was a sudden break in the clouds, and for a brief moment, the white disk of the moon glowed directly against the sky. Ian had the sense that it was shining just for him, as he had as a child when he used to call it up to make wishes. Only now he had one wish. "Save us, Rhiannon," he murmured. "Save all of us." The woman shuffled Ian into the center of a small village square that loomed like a barely remembered dream in the fog. She rang a tripod-mounted alarm bell. "You can't do that! You'll bring them down on us." "But if it does, there'll be no discussion," she said, dismissing his objection. "But if it doesn't, there must be." Within minutes, 36 men and women, all dressed in homespun old-style kilts and plaids, had gathered. She told Ian's tale and had him retell it again to all who asked. "You can't just stand here debating," Ian insisted. We have to get further into the mountains before the sun comes up and dissipates this fog, or they'll find us. You may be the last free village in Scotland." There was a murmur through the crowd at that, and a debate began, though it was a quiet one and mostly in archaic Gaelic, which Ian could not understand. Finally, the woman who Ian had first encountered and who he learned was named Jeannie spoke. "We'll sleep no more, it is decreed," she said, as if from an ancient pronouncement. "This day the Scotland we fled to escape the tyranny of the English usurper has need of our hand. Ne'er night will come to this village again." And as she said the words, Ian remembered the legend. As the men and women and barons went to their homes to gather what they needed, he remembered from the dim corners of his memory. It was a legend he'd heard as a child when he'd wandered those same glens in hopes of finding it. The legend of a single village who so hated the oppression of the English overlords that as one, they prayed to the old gods and goddesses to be free. And they were. The prayer was granted, and the mists themselves swallowed the village to a place outside time, to waken one day every 100 years in the place it had stood, and each night to sleep 100-year sleep till it woke. Should any leave the town, the legend said, the enchantment was forever broken. While Ian stood aghast, the menfolk and the women assembled in the square again, but this time with clamour and targe and blunderbuss and axe. They lined the narrow street and moved toward the bridge. Ian felt swept up in a dream as he marched over the bridge with the rest of them behind the high-pitched wailing of 3 pipers. He lived the legend as the mist lifted and they encountered the first plastic and glass craft of the invaders. The sound beams of the creatures fell flat against the wailing counter of the blaring Highland pipes. The cold steel of the sword blades cracked the plastic shells of their craft and their life suits like eggs, and the soft blue bodies inside were no challenge at all. The pipes, it seemed, also did more to pulp the inner cells of the invaders than any great sword could have, as they were beings that lived by and with waves of sound. So it was that pipers marched before all the armies of mankind in what came to be called the Great Retaking. A new legend was born that day of how the wee beasties from the outer rim could not take the challenge of the pipes when they were all brigadoomed. And that's as true as I sit here, so help me.
Thank you, Teel. Very great reading, sir. So, what was? I mean, aside from the obvious inspiration, what led you to write that one?
Well, when I first saw the movie a billion years ago, and then auditioned for the part in it for the stage play, I didn't get it because I was too much taller than all the others. I'm the only actual Scotsman there. It occurred to me that what would happen if it came back at some point in the future when things were bad? And so I just started to play with that. And of course, the obvious pun, because I always go for the low joke, was right there for me to bring up. So, if you can't go for the low joke, there's no point in going for a joke at all.
That's, well, hey, look, the low joke is likely to tickle everyone's funny bone. So for our audience, if you have questions for Teel, please throw them in the comments. I am happy to sit here and ask Teel some questions. Teel has lots of cool stuff to talk about. And I like the candles, Teel. That was a nice touch. Your backdrop is quite literary.
Well, I don't have much, so I might as well dress it up. And I can't do virtual backgrounds. I had a great virtual background of the Highlands cloaked in mist, but I can only do that on Zoom. So here you have it.
That's it. Well, I can safely say that as far as our readers tonight, I suspect you're going to be the best dressed.
Well, that's only because I have no shame. And there you have it.
So how many times have you been killed on screen, Teel?
I couldn't even begin to count. I know that in Troma's War, I was killed 18 times. But my buddy Ross, who was on set one more day than me, was killed 22. And I will never forgive him for that. He just kept changing costumes and running in as a different guy and getting blown off buildings and set on fire and shot. So
he had to outdo you.
Yeah.
There's a documentary series that was on Shudder about cursed films recently, and you're in one of them. Do you know that you're in one of the episodes?
I may be in the one about Toxic Avenger, Toxie 4, Toxie 5.
Well, it's not about the film you were in, but they're talking to, I think they're talking to Lloyd Kaufman.
Yeah.
You're in the background getting set on fire.
Yeah. Well, I was Toxie's stunt double, and and whenever he was the Noxious Avenger, I was the Toxic Avenger. Whatever one was the back to the camera was me. I got dragged behind the truck. I'm the one who crashed through the windshield and all of that. But I'm also in a movie called Band, which was Roberta Findlay, who directed the infamous movie Snuff, which wasn't a snuff film, but just looked like it. I was in the last film she directed called Band, which was Debbie Rochon's first American film. She was in a documentary before that. It was her first film. And it never got released. And Debbie's still been fighting to get it released. It was about a punk rock horror where a punk rocker dies horribly in a bathroom. And years later, when a radio station takes over the building, his ghost inhabits the meek DJ. And so, it comes from the old joke of, oh, don't go in the bathroom. Something horrible happened in there. Well, this is what horrible happened. So
I'll keep my fingers crossed that gets a release someday.
Yeah, I got killed in that a bunch of times. I was in one movie where I got killed. I doubled every male in the film, and I beat myself up and threw myself off a roof.
That's talent. That is talent. We do have a question in the comments. This is from Rob Atone. Teel, did you find it difficult combining science fiction with the Scottish historical element?
Not really, because Scotland is really a place of mystery and mysticism. I mean, I wrote this probably 25 or 30 years ago, before Outland, popularized the fact that you could walk through stones. And as far as I know, but I've been reading about, there are so many elements of Scottish history that sound like somebody made them up. I mean, Sawney Bean, there's an entire clan of cannibals, down the road from Edinburgh, and which was the basis for The Hills Have Eyes.
Yes.
They took that and set it in Nevada. But so there's so many elements of the Scottish history that literally sound like somebody made them up, and you can verify them. No, it really happened. It's, and I've been there, and it really is, when you walk the hills of Scotland, you feel like just over that hill, there is going to be something fantastic or fantastical. So, no, and considering I have no science background, it's not likely I'm going to get into the real science of anything. So I have to skirt the edges of it and make it SF.
Terrific. All right. Well, I think if anybody has more questions for Teel, we can come back towards the end of the program. We can certainly take some extra questions then. I think we're going to move on to our next reader. Teel, thank you so much for that awesome reading.
Thank you, James and Carol. This is pretty awesome.
Yep. Oh, you know what, Teel? We got one more question just came in. I'm going to flip that up to you. Have you ever heard of Kenneth C. Flint, who wrote The Riders of, I think?
Sure. I have heard of him. I have not read it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have not read the book, but I have heard it. I've seen the name. Unfortunately, so little time and so many hundreds of books. And at this point, half of them are people I know. So I owe them to read their books.
The curse of being an author is you get to know a lot of authors.
Yeah. I can't just look at the pictures anymore.
Exactly. All right. Well, Teel, thank you so much. I'm going to introduce our next reader.
Looking forward to it.
Coming up next, we have Amy Grech. Amy has sold more than 100 stories to various anthologies and magazines, including A New York State of Fright, Apex Magazine, Beat to a Pulp Hard-Boiled, Dead Harvest, Dead Man's Tome, Campfire Tales, Book 2, Expiration Date, Frightmare, Hell's Heart, Hell's Highway, Needle Magazine, Psycho Holiday, Real American Horror, Tales from the Lake Volume 3, Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, which was recently published. I think just came out and features a lot of work by HWA NY members, also Thriller Magazine and many others. New Pulp Press published her book of noir stories, Rage and Redemption in Alphabet City. She's an active member of the Horror Writers Association, and I think, and Amy can correct me if I'm wrong when she comes on, but I think she's been a member for something like 25 years. So she's been a really long-standing supporter of the HWA. She's also a member of the International Thriller Writers, and she lives in New York. Her website is crimsonscreams.com, and you can find her at Twitter, twitter.com/Amy Grech.
EV2000. The EV2000 summons its new likeness of June's heart-shaped face to practice using emotions contained within her DNA. Since smiles are the first batch of algorithms Project Double Helix requires, the EV2000 accesses June's. Her full lips curve upwards. Opening the smile file reveals several reasons why this facial expression is used. Homo sapiens smile to express happiness, amusement, or affection. These emotions are highly desirable because meeting a happy human being means all is well. After accessing a recorded sample of June's squeaky voice, the EV2000 says, "I know how to smile now." The second batch of algorithms within Project Double Helix shows pictures of sad people. An explanation accompanies each image. Pouting emphasizes the individual's discontent. This little boy you see here has thrust his bottom lip out so that it covers the top one, making him look grotesque. This woman is frowning to show her disapproval. This man is crying because he is sad. The EV2000 turns the smile on June's face upside down while the third batch of emotions loads. Laughter is next. This emotion fascinates the EV2000 most of all. Laughter is a typical reaction to an enjoyable or shocking event. People usually laugh amongst others, expressing their approval. Harold glances at his watch and realizes that it's 9 o'clock. He rushes over to the visiphone and dials the EV2000 donation hotline a second time. The line rings 6 times before Greta answers. "Hello, thank you for calling the EV2000 blood donation hotline. Press 1. He jabs 5 on the keypad and waits for his call to be transferred. "Enter your security code now." Harold keys in the requested information. "Welcome, Agent Roberts. How may I help you?" The EV2000 greets him wearing June's face. "Tell me what happened to June. What's going on? I didn't program you to talk like my wife." "Change is inevitable. June is resting comfortably." "Can I see her?" He wipes his sweaty forehead with the back of his hand. "If you insist." The EV2000 calls up June's face on his flat panel display and shows it on the visiphone screen. "How are you, June?" Harold starts to pace again. "I've been better," she frowns. "What's wrong? You look terrible." June laughs. "Donating was more tiring than I imagined." She smiles. "Please come get me. I don't feel safe." "Why not?" Harold frowns and stops wearing a hole in the carpet. June pouts. "There isn't anyone else here. I'm lonely and scared. I feel vulnerable." The EV2000 and its android are there. They can keep you company. Harold rubs his chin. "I've just started working on a next best thing. Big thing. Can it wait?" They're machines, or have you forgotten?" She raises her eyebrows. "I'm beginning to think these machines mean more to you than I do." "Don't be ridiculous. I love you more than I love my work." He gives her a dirty look. "I'm on my way." 10 minutes later, a white Jeep pulls into the parking lot and comes to a screeching halt next to June's burgundy BMW. Harold hops out and rushes over to the entrance. The electronic doors sense his presence and open. Panting, he stops in the middle of the vacant lobby, looks at the EV2000 in the corner, and blinks. He's horrified to find that the greeting he programmed on the EV2000's flat panel display has been replaced by his wife's face. She looks different now, haggard, disheveled. He rushes over to the screen and gawks, mortified by what he sees. June frowns. What are you looking at? Her lifeless brown eyes cut through him like a knife. You, what happened? Harold feels faint and grabs the flat panel display for support. Don't you know? She smiles. Where are you hiding, June? Harold scans the hallway but finds it empty. I'm in no mood for games. I'm right in front of you. Take a good look. She laughs. What's wrong? Don't you recognize me? I feel drained and I've lost a lot of weight. Baffled, he touches the screen's warm surface. How did you get in there? Maybe you can tell me. Her smiling face accuses him. I haven't got a clue. Really, I don't. Harold clasps his hands together. What happened while you were donating? She sighs. Oh, nothing out of the ordinary. I went into a room next door and lay down on a black table. Then I watched a wonderful hologram that showed us making love on our honeymoon. When the hologram vanished, so did I. Harold is stricken with fright. He enters his security code on the touchscreen and waits for approval. Access denied. June's face wears an ugly snarl. Frantic, he re-enters his security code and waits. This code is invalid. That's impossible. It was issued to me by the Viper Squad. As Harold watches, his wife's heart-shaped face is replaced by the familiar instructions. Welcome to the EV-2000, the first computerized blood donation center in the United States. Please enter your social security number now. The voice that reads them aloud belongs to June. Is this some kind of sick joke? The only response he receives is a white cursor blinking in the upper left-hand corner of the red screen. And I'll stop there because it's a long story. In Tales from the Canyon of Adan.
That's amazing, Amy.
Thank you, Carol.
You know, I had a friend who donated blood religiously all every couple months as soon as they would let her do it. And she donated platelets and she did the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she donated that much, though. Seriously, yeah. That's creepy. You know, that's a nice mix of horror and sci-fi.
Yes.
Tell me what made you think of all that. Are you a blood donor yourself?
No, but I'm afraid of needles. I have a thyroid condition, so I have to have blood drawn every couple of months.
Oh, yeah. And testing.
So that was one inspiration.
Yeah.
And then, you know, just artificial intelligence and how it can really take over if it runs amok and it's not managed in any way.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me also of, you know, you've forgotten your password, you can't get in. Well, is it you that forgot your password, or did EV-2000 really take over for you? You know,
exactly.
So, yes. What are you saying about society and people versus machines here? What does this make you think about?
Looks like the machines are going to be winning sooner than we'd like.
That's a little bit alarming. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Now, this is different from some of your other stories, though. So, how do you compare and contrast this with some of your other current stuff? I know this one just came out in Tales of Canyons and
It did. Yes. Well, actually, I started this story EV-2000 in college. I was a creative writing minor. So the germ of it started in 1993. When a lot of the technology in the story didn't exist yet. Too bad I wasn't an inventor and I didn't have enough money for patents. You know, like the flat screen, touch screens weren't around yet. The
sure.
weren't around yet. And I wrote it for a science fiction writing workshop I was part of.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's why it's different.
Yeah, that's why. So, yeah. And that's a great choice for us tonight. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That's really cool.
Yes,
I look forward to talking a little bit more at the end. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, excellent. You're welcome.
Cool. I'm going to introduce Marc Abbott next. Marc L. Abbott is the author of the YA novel The Hooky Party and the children's book ATN and the Stardust Express. His short stories Welcome to Brooklyn, Gabe and A Marked Man are featured in the Bram Stoker Award-nominated horror anthology A New York State of Fright and the Hell's Heart horror anthology. He's the co-author of Hell at the Way Station, the two-time African-American Literary Award-winning horror anthology with award-winning author Stephen Van Patten. In film, he's the writer and director of the horror short Snap and Being Followed. He's a 2-time nominated Best Actor for his role in the sci-fi film Impervia and a 2015 Moth Story Slam and Grand Slam Storyteller winner. The writer and performer of the storytelling solo shows Love African American Style and of Cats and Men, A Storyteller's Journey, he's also host of the monthly storytelling show, Man, You've Got to Hear This, which he says much better than I do, in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and he's one of the hosts for the podcast Beef, Wine, and Shenanigans. You can find out more about Marc at whoismarcabbott.com. Can't wait to hear you, Jim. Can't wait to hear you, Marc.
This is an excerpt from the short story, The Secret of Hanlon. Like most rural gas stations, this one had 5 gas pumps, a large steel canopy to protect them from the weather, and a brick building off to the side housing a 2-door garage and an office. Bright lights above the canopy illuminated the pumping area. Stacked motor cans formed a makeshift pyramid, and Basil stopped in front of them and rolled the window down. The attendant inside sat low behind the counter, watching television, his head moving back and forth. Basil couldn't make out the show, and he walked to the door and knocked. The attendant ignored him. Hey, can I get some service out here? The attendant still didn't get up. Basil turned and walked away when something moved out the corner of his eye. He glanced across from the station. A wooden fruit stand sat partially in shadow, but he could make out the produce in the bins. Behind them, a glassy-eyed man stared back at him. Who's out there? A voice called from the office. Basil turned around, and the attendant stood in the doorway. He was a middle-aged man in dirty overalls with the name Carl printed over the right breast. I was calling you, Basil said peevishly. I heard you. I didn't move till my show's over. What can I do you for? I had an accident down on the road. Something flattened 2 of my tires. I need new ones. Carl approached the car to inspect the damage. Basil followed. Ooh-wee! What the hell did you run over? All I found was this big-ass yam with a thorny root or roots wrapped around the axle. And Carl eyeballed him. You're saying a yam did this? Basil reached into the car and retrieved the yam. Carl immediately took several steps back. Whoa! I know. Have you ever seen anything like this? Carl didn't answer. He stared at the yam, then his eyes slowly shifted toward the man at the fruit stand. The latter moved slightly and kicked the stand, causing it to shift, catching Basil's attention. You ran over that thing? Carl asked. Yeah. Basil turned back to him. I didn't see it in the road. Maybe it fell off of a truck. He offered it to the attendant. You want to hold it? The attendant shook his head. No, that's okay. Let me get you up and running, okay? 3 tires, right? I think I have what you need in the garage. Carl glared nervously at the fruit stand one last time before hurrying to the garage. Don't you need to know what size tire? I know what size you need. I know the make and the model of that car. Back in a minute. Wait there. Will do. Carl returned, pulling a jack behind him. He looked Basil up and down. Can it get by? Basil put the yam back in the car and glared at the fruit stand. A portable generator near the stand suddenly roared to life, and a string of white lights illuminated a small wooden shack that had more rows of baskets on either side, filled with a variety of fruits and vegetables. The elderly man, whose glassy eyes faded as the light hit them, stared at Basil only a moment longer before turning to tend to the produce. Basil walked over. Not until Basil stood before him did the man lift his head and pass his hands across the baskets. Most of them held squash, corn, tomatoes, and peanuts. There were a couple of melons, and Basil didn't see anything worth buying, and he wandered to the end of the row and peered inside the last basket. and that was filled with yams, large, but nowhere quite near quite the size that he had found out on the highway. He picked one up to inspect it. "You grow all these?" "You bet I do. This is pretty impressive. It's a good size. The best in all handling. You can get them anywhere else. I take real good care of raising my yams, son. Trust me, you won't find any out there with such a fine product." "Funny you should say that. I just happen to have one in my car that's, well, impressive in its own way." "Is that so? What exactly makes this yam so impressive? You ever seen them grow roots with thorns?" And the man grew silent. He took the yam from Basil's hand and stroked it before returning it to the basket. "Can't say I have," he said. "And just so you know, yams don't grow thorny roots." The elderly man began walking away. Basil followed. "Well, then, I found a rare vegetable." "You sure it was a yam? Where we have here I haven't laid eyes on such a thing." Basil pointed to the highway. "I ran over one out there. It had roots like tentacles." He wriggled his fingers. "And sharp thorns on them." Rustling from the basket caught Basil's attention. "You say you have it in your car?" "Yes, I'm taking it home to show my family. My granddad used to grow potatoes. I thought he could tell me what the deal is with this." And then the basket tipped over. The string of lights went out, and the elderly man grabbed Basil's wrist, digging his fingers deep into his flesh. He pulled Basil toward the stand, and the latter stumbled into the basket of fruits. "Let go of me!" Basil tried to pull away. "Does your family know you're here?" The elderly man's voice turned raspy. "What are you doing? Let me go." "No." Something scurried from under the basket, and Basil heard it move toward him. It brushed against his foot, heading toward the car, and Basil turned, hoping for a glimpse. A root whipped out from the dark and wrapped around his throat. Its grip tightened, and Basil struggled to pull it off, and a razor-sharp thorn pressed against his jugular. Basil froze. The root started to tug. He cautiously turned toward the elderly man. The root had come from behind the man's neck. It started to pull him to the right, and that's when he saw the silhouette of the thing attached to the man's shoulder. "What the—" "Stay still," a new voice whispered to Basil. "We don't wish to harm you. We just want our brother back." "Brother?" The root pulled him closer. His eyes adjusted to the dark, and Basil made out an oval-shaped creature with a dozen small eyes, glassy eyes. 6 of the eyes gazed past him, while the others kept close watch on his movement. "We warned him not to leave the group, but the young are so curious." Basil felt more roots pass over his foot, scurrying from the flattened, fallen basket. He dared not move his head. His jugular was still in danger of being pierced. "Don't kill me." Basil reached up to touch the root. "Put your hand down." "I said we don't want to harm you." Basil shifted his gaze to the elderly man's other shoulder. He could see roots moving up of it. And the yam that had run over came into view and lay on the man's shoulder. A large root with exposed thorns slapped down onto the body of the yam, followed by a sickening sucking sound. The generator came back on, illuminating the string of lights. The roots attached to the creature's body were transparent, and Basil saw thick red fluid flowing through them. To the right, another larger yam, and one had been talking to him, inserted a root into the elderly man's mouth like a fishhook. Thicker red fluid flowed through it as well. Basil felt sick, and the elderly man shuddered. The yam continued draining fluid, and finally, the smaller yam on the left made a cooing sound, and its eyes opened wide. And the fluid stopped, and the root slid out of the man's mouth. The root around Basil's throat also slipped away along with the thorn, and Basil rubbed his neck, bent over, and threw up. "What the hell are you?" he asked. The yam pointed to the fallen basket. All of its yams watched Basil. They used their roots to stand up on, and their bodies appeared suspended in midair. One by one, they used their roots to form a circle surrounding him, and Basil screamed for Carl. "He cannot help you more than he already has," the creature said. "It is unfortunate that you saw us like this. We had hoped to retrieve our brother unnoticed." Basil raised his hand. Your secret's safe with me. I won't tell anyone what I've seen. Of course you will. You'll tell people. It's in your nature to do so. People will come, and when you tell them, they will want to see us. It removed its roots from around the elderly man who shuffled away. A huge yam with roots the size of small tree trunks now stood before Basil, and it stepped closer. We have lived here in peace for longer than I care to remember. This county belongs to us, which means its inhabitants belong to us. What are you? Where did you come from? What purpose would it serve you to know what we are? And Basil turned when he heard the pickup truck pull into the station, and the yam made a rueful sound.
Thank you, Marc.
You're welcome.
Such a great story.
Thank you.
I have to ask, though, does this deep-rooted fear of yams that you have extend to other root vegetables and tubers, or is it exclusively yams?
No, yams are actually my favorite of potatoes. I love them. I guess the idea for this came about because when you leave a potato out too long, it begins to grow spuds. And we had one in the apartment that just basically started growing spuds one day, and it was just very, very creepy looking. And it just inspired me to just tell this kind of creepy science fiction story.
Very cool. I picture some sort of like horrific Thanksgiving incident in your home. Like, the yams, they went bad. If anyone has questions for Marc, please feel free to post them in the comments. Marc, you have such a varied background. Mm-hmm. Acting, you've made films, you do stage performance, you've written one-man plays and performed them. Mm-hmm. Do you find that work, the performance work, is an influence on your writing, on your stories, your prose writing?
It is. A lot of times, I've often told people when I'm really deep into a piece, I will kind of go psycho and start talking in the voices of the characters, just to kind of get an idea of how they're supposed to sound, and oftentimes actually writing the words the way they talk, so that I could kind of get a better understanding of the development of certain characters and where I want them to go.
Cool. So it helps you find the character's identity.
Yeah, definitely. Although, once you go back to writing, you can't, it's hard to write the way they talk, because then most people, it starts to look like gibberish. So you kind of have to tell people, he talked in this particular accent, or, a couple of the words you can play with, and people will go, oh, okay, I got it. So. Right.
Mm-hmm. And then I just had a question on the tip of my tongue, and it left me. But the other things that you do, they are collaborative. Mm-hmm. Making film is, you're collaborating with other creative people. You're directing actors if you're the director, or you're performing with a director. Writing a story, it's you against the blank page. Do you find the challenges different from one to the other?
Yeah. Because oftentimes when you're writing, there's nobody to bounce things off of, nobody to kind of turn around. I mean, I've done collaborative work. This particular story comes from an anthology that Stephen and I put together, and we talked back and forth about where we wanted each of the stories that we put in there to go. But normally when you're writing alone, it's the only person you have to collaborate with is yourself. So it's, often people have often asked me, do you write outlines before you begin to work on your stuff so that you get an idea? And sometimes I don't, because the outline becomes more intimidating, or I might feel like I got to stick to the outline instead of letting the story flow. So a lot of times the written word is a lot harder, and it takes it's a much longer process.
Do you find it more personal?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've done solo shows about my life, and, opening up to strangers is a little more refreshing because people don't know you. They're getting a part of you. You're sharing a part of yourself. With writing, you're truly exposing, like, horror. One of the things about horror, you're truly exposing your fears. And it could come from, like, this story isn't so much a fear of vegetables as it is the road that I based this story on in Virginia. It used to terrify me when I was a kid because you just never knew what would pop up at any time. So, yeah.
So you're digging deep for that then.
Yeah. This one was it was a lot of fun to write because I could see the visuals in my head. Yeah. Sort of, I kind of patterned the yams after the tripods from War of the Worlds. The fact that they would walk on their tendrils instead of just kind of rolling or doing something like that.
Very cool. So I have one more question for you, and because I would feel remiss if I didn't ask you a horror movie question of some kind. I don't know if anybody in our audience tonight was ever in attendance at the live readings that we've done in New York. We often do trivia giveaways where we'll ask a trivia question in between the readings, and the authors donate a book for whoever can get the answer right. And just so you know where Marc's coming from with horror movies, we had to ban him from participating. Because he was always first hand up and he always got it right. He knew the horror movies. So if you had to pick one horror movie you've seen in 2020 that you'd like to recommend to people, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. Now it's escaping me. It's an underwater. Wow. Now it's really escaping me the name of this film, but it's in it.
There was a horror movie.
Yes, that's it. I think it is. It's Underwater with Kristen Stewart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That
Okay.
I watched that like right before during the pandemic, because I changed cable companies and it was one of those freebies that I got, and I absolutely enjoyed it. So I would recommend that. And particularly if you're a Lovecraft fan, you'll get why.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've been hearing good things about that. I'll have to put it on my list.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Marc, thanks so much for reading tonight, and we'll come back to you at the end with some more discussion.
Okay.
We're going to introduce our next reader now. And joining us next is Lisa Morton, and we are excited and honored to have Lisa with us tonight. She is a screenwriter, an author of nonfiction books, and a prose writer whose work was described by the American Library Association's Reader's Advisory Guide to Horror as consistently dark, unsettling, and frightening. She is a 6-time winner of the Bram Stoker Award, the author of 4 novels and over 150 short stories, and a world-class Halloween expert. Her forthcoming releases include Weird Women, classic supernatural fiction from groundbreaking female writers, 1852 to 1923, co-edited with Leslie S. Klinger, and that actually is no longer forthcoming. It's out. I have a copy on my shelf. Also, Calling the Spirits, A History of Seances, and the collection Night Terrors and Other Stories. Learn more about Lisa at www.lisamorton.com.
Hey, everybody. First of all, I want to thank Jim and Carol for having me on tonight with such great readers. Teel and Amy and Marc were all great. I'm going to be reading a short piece from originally published in an anthology called Cinema Spec. It will be in my forthcoming collection coming out next year, Night Terrors and Other Tales, and it's called The End. Jay pulls the disc from the computer's DVD tray and eyes it for a moment, almost as if he can somehow see its contents with his eyes alone. So this is it. On the disc is a movie called The End. Jay has heard about the movie on blogs, in forums, from friends. No one he knows has actually seen the movie, but they all know something about it. That it was made somewhere in Europe, or maybe Asia, or the slums of Calcutta. That it's nearly impossible to find, and that if it shows up online anywhere, YouTube or on eBay, it vanishes again within minutes. That no one who has seen it will talk about it. That it's cursed. That it changes for whoever watches it. That the things it shows come true. That it's the most disturbing film ever made. Which, of course, means Jay must see it. He's a connoisseur of horror. If it terrifies others, he'll be at best mildly amused, maybe impressed if the gore effects are good enough. He's been trying to find The End since he first heard about it months ago. In a chat room for Fright fans. He found it in a BitTorrent stream on the dark web one night, downloaded it into his computer, and burned it to a disk just to be sure. His roommate would want to see it too. They've talked about it after all, but the roommate is already late getting in, and Jay doesn't want to wait too much. The movie is short, no more than 15 minutes, so he figures he can watch it twice in one night. He goes to the DVD player and loads the disc, falls back onto his couch facing his huge television. He expects the image to be grainy, muddy, with that look and sound distinctive to fifth-generation duplicates, but the picture that flares to life on the screen is crystal clear. There are no opening production company logos or credits, no triumphant fanfare. The movie simply starts. It shows an old man, very old, bent as he walks, clutching a crumpled paper bag tightly to his chest, holding a flashlight before him. It's night, an urban locale that could be the downtown heart of any big city in the world, New York, London, Hong Kong, or Hollywood. It's obviously very late because there's no traffic. The only sound comes from the old man's shuffling feet, the rustling of the bag, his labored breathing. The shot is wide, tracking with him as he makes his slow way down a sidewalk. Although there's nothing overtly frightening about the scene, something about it is making Jay uneasy. Perhaps it's the man's utter isolation in the frame. There are no cars going past, no other pedestrians, no power on in the stores or apartments lining the street. The only light comes from the flashlight held in the old man's trembling hand. In fact, Jay starts to wonder how they did it. The camera has now been following the old man for at least a minute, and Jay can only imagine how much the filmmakers had to pay to seal off a section of a large city, even late at night, and get all the lights shut down. Jay wonders when the real scares will kick in. Maybe it'll be zombies or giant rats or outlaw biker gangs. Even though he appreciates the technical expertise of the single unbroken shot thus far, 2 minutes into the film now, he's anxious for something to happen. The old man stops by a dark shop window, pausing to catch his breath. Apparently, even his snail's pace is too much for him. He tries to huddle farther down into his threadbare coat and starts forward again. There's a flash of something in the window as he walks away. Jay blinks in surprise and taps pause on the remote. There, in the glass, it looks like a face. Jay hits the step backward button, moving the image back a frame at a time until the face is at its brightest. It's a young man's face, pale, screaming. Jay walks forward until he's 6 inches away from the screen and he peers in disbelief. It's his face. He moves right and left, thinking it's an impossible reflection, but the face remains. He examines it more critically, thinking it's obviously someone who just looks like him, but no, there's that same distinctive bump in the bridge of the nose, the one he inherited from his mother, and around it is his lank brown hair, which is too long right now. He's screaming. His face is contorted in unimaginable terror. Jay frantically backs up a few more frames and the face disappears as if its owner had stepped away from the glass. He goes forward again and there it is, occupying exactly 6 frames, a quarter of a second of screen life. He scrolls back and forth over the face a few times, trying to imagine some way it could be his. It must be a joke, a clever Photoshop prank, something his friends got together. Cursed. He shakes off that notion and finally lets the film roll forward at normal speed. It's the old man again, still staggering down the eerily empty streets. No music, no dialogue, no city sounds, no ambience. Jay is increasingly anxious. Nothing's happening. No monster attack, no torture scene involving young girls and burly men in masks, but there's definitely been some sort of apocalypse. It's simply not possible to account for the old man's aloneness in any other way. The world must be dead. The film has been on now for 5 minutes. It's still a single shot, unbroken from the first frame. Jay realizes there's something unnatural about both the length of that shot and the clarity of it, and a shudder races through him. In fact, he almost considers turning this off, stopping it while he can, but he doesn't. He lets it play and watches, stomach tightening in dread as the old man finally leaves the street to enter a building. It's an ancient apartment building, and the flashlight beam flickers over peeling paint and cobwebs. The old man opens the first door he comes to. For some reason, Jay is even more unnerved by the fact that the door wasn't locked, and he enters an apartment. Jay finds himself irrationally hoping that someone will come forth from the depths of the apartment to greet the old man, another spark of life in this urban desolation, but no such comfort is forthcoming. The old man sets the bag and flashlight down, shrugs out of his coat, lays it across a table, moves to light a propane lantern. Somehow Jay knows that the old man has survived something cataclysmic, but he's survived it alone. There's nothing left to him now but the emptiness of both this apartment and the world outside. The lantern begins to hiss. The apartment fills with wan light. It's as barren as the city outside, just a few sticks of dilapidated furniture, no photos, no pets, no plants. The old man pulls a large jar from the bag and sets it carefully on the table. The contents are thick, yellowish. Jay can't figure out what it is. The old man starts to turn towards the camera, and Jay realizes he hasn't yet seen the man's face. The man is moving slowly, making the turn last an excruciating eternity, and the camera is pushing in throughout the torturous movement. Jay is shaking now, his palms sweating, his breathing coming in shallow gasps. He doesn't want to see the old man's face, but he can't turn away as the camera moves in slowly, slowly. Finally, the old man's face is revealed, caught in the whitish propane light, sealed forever in the camera's tight frame. It's a human face, all too human, in fact. Old, very old, with a few scars nearly lost beneath the gridwork of wrinkles and stubble. The eyes are sunken and roomy, the hair only a few long wisps, the mouth a toothless cavern edged by gray lips, and the nose has an unmistakable bump near the center of the bridge. Jay is still screaming when the image abruptly goes black a few seconds later.
Thank you, Lisa. That was terrific. So that's in your forthcoming collection.
That will be out in May. We will launch that at StokerCon.
Ah, excellent. Okay, I think it's going to be a very busy StokerCon. A lot of people are looking to make a splash there, so I'm sure it'll get a lot of attention. So I do have a question for you, and I was thinking about this. This is going to sound weird, so bear with me. But speaking of weird women, do you consider yourself a weird woman? And I mean that in the sense of writing horror in that tradition that those early female horror authors were writing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it made editing that book or co-editing it with Les a really interesting experience. I definitely felt a real kinship with many of those authors, despite the fact that we are separated by at least a century, I think, in almost every case.
So I haven't dug into the stories yet. I read the introduction, and one of the facts that you and Les included there really struck me, which is that a lot of the authors you included in that book were really successful selling their fiction in their time. And they were making a living writing fiction. And yet somehow, despite that, we really sort of lost track of them for so many years. What do you think is what do you think are the factors behind that?
There are a couple of factors. I think one of the chief ones is that these female writers tended to write in a wider variety of genres. There were very few of them that focused exclusively on ghost stories or on weird stories. And in fact, you'll find that obviously with male authors too, but I think it's no surprise that the authors that we know best from that time period, like Charlotte Riddell, wrote a lot in that genre, and she had enough to put together collections. And the collections were often the ways that these stories got passed down and remembered. If you only wrote 2 or 3 of these stories, I think it made them harder to keep track of through the decades.
So it's those who had a bigger body of work in the genre stood the test of time a little better. So it's really a service you're doing for the entire horror community and the literary community to bring those stories back into the limelight.
Well, I'd sure like to think so. I mean, the stories are so great that I think people are really going to be surprised by how contemporary many of them feel. There's even a weird Western. I mean, who knew that women over 100 years ago were writing a weird Western? So.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even thought weird Western was a thing back then.
Yeah.
But that's coming from for me. Weird Westerns was an idea I first encountered in comic books, so it's a very modern idea to me. But so what has the reception been so far to the book? Have you gotten any feedback from readers, reviews, things like that?
It's been really gratifying. We got starred reviews in Booklist and in Library Journal. We had Crime Reads excerpt our entire introduction, put that online. I'm really happy that people are able to see that and read it easily. And so far, readers have been really happy with it too.
That's terrific. A non-writing related question for you. What is the most memorable, or one of the most memorable books that's come across your path at the Iliad?
Oh, well, I just sold to someone a first edition of Robert Chambers' The King in Yellow. And that was 1895. It was the true first edition. I don't mind telling you that it really hurt to sell that to someone else. But it went to I think you do. And it went to a perfect home, at least. If I can't have this book, I'm really happy with who ended up with it. But we also, another one that I would love to be able to take home is a true first edition of Arthur Machen's The Great God Pan. So, yeah, we have some pretty remarkable things come in there.
That's terrific. Yeah, I'd say those are always tempting. I see those. There's a couple of bookshops locally that have, the locked glass book display for the first editions and signed books, and there's some really tempting books in those, but they are pricey.
Yeah, you've got good taste.
Great. So for Night Terrors. Is that going to be a mix of new stories and reprints?
It's actually a sort of greatest hits reprint and a collection. And oddly enough, I haven't done one of those yet. I've done a couple of themed collections. I've done a small little 4-story collection with Cemetery Dance. This is the first one that is fairly large. It's got 20 stories in it, and I wrote one new story for the collection.
Oh, okay. And I forget if that was in your bio, but who's publishing that?
Omnium Gatherum.
Oh, terrific. Okay. Yeah, they produce some really beautiful books.
They do, and I happen to like the idea that it's run by Kate Jones, and so Weird Women are working on both writing and publishing this book. That's
excellent. All right, so I think at this point, if there are questions for our readers, feel free to post those in the comment. We're going to bring everybody back in. It's going to look like, Hollywood Squares or the Brady Bunch, take your pick, and talk a little bit about what all of our authors have coming up. Okay. Just bear with me while I navigate the controls. All right. Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
Thanks again for the wonderful readings, for sharing your stories with us. We're really glad that this worked out, that everybody could be on.
I want to thank Marc for justifying my hate of vegetables all these years.
It's true, Teel. I've never seen you eat a vegetable.
Mhm.
Why don't we just go around? We'll start back with Teel and just tell us a little bit about what's next for you, if you have an upcoming publication or if you're going to be doing any other events or online appearances.
All right, I have Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, which always must be said that way. The current issue that's out, I have a story with Amy and with Steve Van Patten are in the same issue. And in October, I have 2 stories in the Mystery Weekly Sherlock Holmes issue. And one of the stories is The Adventure of Sherlock Hominid, wherein chimpanzees solve crimes. And I'm also, I don't know release date. It should be very soon. From Pro Se, I have Cowboy in Carpathia, where the dean of all pulp writers goes up against the Prince of Darkness from Carpathia. I won't say any other names, but you know who they are. And I have a book coming out from Airship 27 called Killing Shadows, which is a straight-up thriller. That'll be out, I believe, by November.
You are a very busy writer.
I got no life, you know.
Well, look, we've all got a lot of downtime to play with. So.
Yep.
Amy, how about you? What's next on your calendar?
Well, first I'll echo Teel. Here's the current issue of Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, and I read an excerpt from my story, EV 2000. I just signed a contract for a story to be in the upcoming anthology Flashes of Hope. And in December, I'm going to appear on the Cursed Morsels podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. And I'm working on a couple of short stories. I have others out pending whether they're going to be yay or nay to be in different anthologies. So keep an eye out.
Where can people find the Cursed Morsels podcast?
I think they're on Spotify. Probably Bizbin, probably Apple Podcasts. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So pretty easy to find.
Yes.
Great. Marc, how about you? Anything on the horizon?
On September 25th, I will be performing Love African American Style online. That is my second solo show. I'll be doing that with this Queen's Theater. And later in, I think about November, I will be headlining a workshop for the Center of Fiction entitled Lovecraft from an African-American Perspective. And we're going to be reviewing The Ballad of Black Tom and comparing that with the horror at Red Hook. So I'm actually extremely excited about being a part of that.
That's a multi-week course, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
So, and Lisa, I know we didn't get to it in your Q&A, but I know Halloween time is always super busy for you. How does the next month or so look? Do you have a lot on your plate for October?
Oh yeah. There are some interesting changes this year. We're seeing everybody's doing podcasts this year. In the past, I got used to radio interviews on the phone. It's all podcasting this year. My calendar is pretty booked up at this point. And I also have my seance book will be coming out on September 26th, Calling the Spirits: A History of Seances. And there's a lot of people who want to talk about that. I think a lot of people are sitting at home in lockdown, probably thinking it might be fun to call spirits right now. So, and then of course I'm looking forward to StokerCon. It's going to happen. Doggone it!
Yes.
We're doing everything we can to make it happen. But Brian and I are getting some extra gray hairs, though.
I have one thing I forgot to mention. I'm reading October 11th with Noir Debar from DC. I'll be reading from Call Back for a Corpse.
Oh, cool.
Oh, nice.
Paranormal mystery of mine.
Very good.
Those are great. Well, Jim, how about you? What do you have coming up?
Well, actually, I'll be reading here next month.
Yay.
So that's it.
We had to twist his arm, guys. He's shy.
That's true. Yes.
Let him out of the basement.
Yeah, this is well, this this is I should probably come clean and tell people this isn't my actual basement that looks like a room in an abandoned building on the abandoned campus of a former psychiatric hospital complex, which is what it really is. But what do I have coming next? I'm working on a ton of projects, none of which I can announce yet. They're all sort of at that point where they're almost ready. And so hopefully I'll have more to say in October. How about you, Carol?
I have a story, Lisa, this is a fun thing for you. I have a story coming out in an anthology on Halloween. And it's called The Devil's Due, a story called Face It from Valhalla Books. And it's, kind of the Faustian idea of, okay, what kind of deals have you made that you maybe shouldn't have made? So that's going to be fun. And a couple other things coming up with no dates yet. So I'm looking forward to those. But
Awesome. All right. Do we have any more questions from the audience? We can take those in the comments, or if any of our readers have questions, or if there's anything you'd like to pitch in before we wrap up, we can certainly hear what you guys have to say.
I actually have one question for Marc, because I've seen one of his live one-man shows, and they're very powerful.
Yeah.
How did you reconceive it for essentially a television audience as opposed to having a live audience? Because I do know it changes the energy.
So it's going, instead of doing it the way I did it on stage because when the original way it's done, I do the different voices of the people. I'm restructuring it to be more detailed story streamlined. So rather than the details be in the body performance, I'm going back to the original way I normally tell stories. I'll still be doing the voices. I'll still be going in and out of it. But it took a minute because, this particular show had a lot of, we had backgrounds, we had music. There's this whole montage near the end that I really enjoy. And I can't do any of that. And I had hoped that they wanted me to do the other story, the storyteller's journey, but they were like, no, we think this one is a little more uplifting. And I'm like, okay, so we'll have to change some things around. It's still going to be, it's the same stories, but they're going to be told a little more. There's going to be more information that I have to give rather than performance. Because the other problem I've found is when you're trying to do those kind of stories at home, I have to stay in front of the microphone. I can't move around or anything. Or people they'll lose me. So so that's it's we'll see how it goes. I think I think everybody will enjoy it.
You're a really good storyteller. It'll go great.
Thank you.
And Marc, where's that being broadcast online? Where can people find it?
I'm going to be posting the link for that pretty soon.
Okay.
So if you follow me on Twitter, who is Marc Abbott on Twitter, and my Facebook handle, who is Marc L. Abbott on Facebook, I'll have the handles up pretty soon, and everybody can tune into it on the 25th.
Terrific.
I'd also like to just throw in that we have a newsletter that we're just putting together to help support our Galactic Terrors readings here and let everybody know what's coming up and information about the folks who've been in. So you saw a brief little tease of it on our intro video. We'll put it up. Here's the link. It's a funny looking link, but that's way shorter than what it could be otherwise. We do promise, Scouts Honor, we won't sell your name, address, soul, or blood type to anyone who might be interested, and we won't spam you, anything like that. So that'd be fun. And be delighted to have you join that. And let me tell you a little bit more so we can send out some of the links that folks have mentioned as well. And I do want to say hi to all the people in the chat who are saying nice things. While we're here in the studio, it's really cool. We get to hear all of the stories of what everybody's reading, but we don't have a way to type back comments except for Jim, who is our studio master. So hello to everybody, and thank you for devious man, and thank you for all the really good comments and for coming and joining us with this. It's really cool. And Lee Murray, you were nice enough to ask which anthology was my story coming out, and it's called The Devil's Due. It'll be out on Halloween. So.
Yes, and I just, Lee, thank you for joining us tonight. This is one of the amazing things about doing readings this way. Lee is in New Zealand, and so we really are. Our reach tonight is just, there's something special about doing, that intimate in-person reading in a bar or something in New York City. But this is pretty amazing that so many people can come and hear the readings, hear the stories, and see the authors.
The fact that we can reach Middle Earth directly.
Very good. So, but yeah, as Carol said, please sign up for our newsletter, and we're going to proceed with this series every second Thursday of the month. That's the plan. So our next reading will be October 8th, I believe. And we have some fantastic readers lined up for that. We hope you'll come back and join us when Linda Addison is reading, April Gray, and Rob Atone. I'll be reading too. I hope that won't deter you from attending.
This guy Jim Chambers is pretty good. Yeah.
Jim is awesome.
Basement every once in a while to read. It's good.
That's it. They unshackle me to stretch the legs, and we have some great readers lined up for November and December as well. We'll be announcing those soon, and we hope you'll come back. I suggest if you'd like to follow us, click below. If you're looking on YouTube, click below the screen to subscribe. You could like us, subscribe. We're going to, if everything goes as expected, technically we're going to be posting the recordings of these readings on our YouTube channel, the Galactic Terror YouTube channel. And so you'll be able to revisit them or catch one that you missed. And we're really just excited to be able to do this. I think, is there anything else we need to cover, Carol?
I think this is great. I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to come and join us. And it was fun to listen from backstage, and I hope everybody in the audience had fun too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting this together.
Thank you, Jim and Carol. It was excellent. Well done all around.
Awesome.
It's really nice to see all the faces out there, all of the names of familiar people that we can't be in a room with right now.
Yeah.
In some cases for legal reasons with me, but.
Well, thank you all, Lisa, Teel, Amy, Mark. We are really grateful for you giving us your time and sharing your stories. Good luck with all your projects.
Thank you.
I will make sure to post this video as soon as I figure out how to do that. And I guess that's all we have for tonight. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to leave you with our little closeout.
And before you do that, I just want to say a special thank you to Jim Chambers for piloting this endeavor in the middle of an extremely busy month that he's been having. I mean, he's been back there pulling all the switches, just like the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. So, kudos to you, sir. Thank you very much.
So, my pleasure. I've seriously upped my game when it comes to clicking skills.
Yeah,
excellent.
Yes.
Death Beetle.
Right. So with that, we'll say goodnight. We hope you'll join us next month. And this has been great. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.